This is the Women's Retail Collective podcast, where I, your host, Anne Mezzenga, pull together retail's most influential women to talk about their careers, how they made it to senior level leadership, and how they're leading their organizations through the rapidly evolving retail industry. This podcast is made possible through the support of our sponsor, Parcel Pending. Don't just improve your customer experience, make it special with Buy Online, Pickup and Locker by Parcel Pending. Purpose-built to meet retailers' unique needs, this smart delivery solution seamlessly integrates with existing order management apps and systems to make BOPUS faster, safer, and more flexible for shoppers. To learn more, visit parcelpending.com. Today on the podcast, we have Patricia Hong. Patricia is a partner at the Consumer and Retail Group at Alvarez Marsal. Patricia, you were prepared for this interview. I can tell because we are wearing matching black motorcycle jackets. I think it's going to be great. There's no denying it. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm so glad. Well, in these conversations, I really like to start way back in the beginning. You told me that you grew up in Brazil. I'd love to just find out a little bit about you and then kind of take me into your first job in retail.
I grew up in Brazil. I was born and raised in Brazil. First generation born in Brazil. My mom is from Spain. My dad is from China. I've been in the US for 20 years. I came here for business school. Okay. It's a great question you asked, because I think one of the questions that you had sent me in advance, because I did prep a little bit, was what drew me to consulting, right? And it's 100% linked to what ended up bringing me to the US, right? So consulting as a career was 100% accidental. I pretty much stumbled into consulting. I did not think I would be doing this 20 years later. I took a job in consulting straight out of college in Brazil because I knew that consulting firms had a program to sponsor people to come and do their MBAs in the US. It was a sure thing. If I did well, I knew I could come over and do my MBA. I really wanted to be here.
What were you what was your initial consulting plan? Like, what were you working on? What kind of projects?
It could be any job, any industry, any topic, right? And I guess that's the beauty of consulting. And that's part of the reason why I fell in love with it, even though, when I went in, I had no idea that that's kind of what would happen. I literally went in for, I'm going to do an MBA. I'm going to stick for this job for 2 years. And then I'm going to figure out what I actually want to do in life.
Right.
And my first job was at a publishing company. It was Brazil's largest publishing company, all kinds of magazines and books and newspapers. And I helped in this super large transformation program. And it was a lot of fun. It was fun. I enjoyed it. But I still didn't think I would be doing this now.
Right.
I still just felt I'm learning and it's driving me towards my goal. And I'm going to be out of here eventually.
Well, how do you really immerse yourself so deeply in, when you're a generalist like that? I mean, what kinds of skills do you think that you have? Because it's not a job that everybody can do. I mean, I think that we hear of consultants and it's a pretty significant dig your heels in, really get up to speed quickly, and then be able to provide, recommendations to giant companies for how they can do their jobs better. Like, what do you think is important or important skills, I guess, to have if somebody's considering taking this path as you did?
So I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about this a lot because as part of this new venture that I'm in, we're recruiting a lot of people, right? And we're training a lot of people. And I mean, the general stock answer, which is absolutely accurate, is, you have to handle problem solving really well. You have to have intellectual curiosity. You have to be a good communicator. You have to be a good listener. You have to go deep into things. So there's a number of things, which are all the things that we use to evaluate our people on, right? But I think that there are a couple of things that are deal breakers in this job for you to truly do it exceptionally, right? And so for me, number one, in my opinion, having been in this job for 20 years now, is you have to be comfortable with the idea that when you go into a new problem, you don't know what the answer is going to be. Even though you are being hired because of your expertise, you should not assume that you already know the answer. And you have to be both comfortable with that feeling, and you also have to kind of enjoy the thrill of knowing that you're going to get there, but you don't know exactly what it's going to look like in the end. And that kind of brings me to the second point, which I think the only way you can do it is if you have a combination of being humble and being confident. And I say that because it's a little bit of a tricky balance, right? Because when you're hired to be an expert and you're an advisor, and you've done this at so many other places, there is a confidence that comes with that, right? But you are in a different client, and the moment in time is never the same, right? So right now we're going through something that there is no baseline for it, right? And that has happened in other times in my life, or you are in a different geography, or you're dealing with, some kind of consumer shift. And so you've got to take everything that you know, and you've got to marry it with what your client knows. And it's a collaboration exercise. So I do believe, humble and confident is another one of those kind of like, you've got to have it to be able to excel in this job.
I'm curious about the competition, because I feel like this is a highly competitive area too, and how you like balance this, like being correct or having your level of expertise, but then also being humble and confident all at the same time. I mean, it feels like it would be a constant kind of juggling game where you're trying to figure out the right levels of when do I show confidence, how do I show expertise, when am I pulling back and saying I don't know the answer? I mean, how do you handle that?
So I think the other thing that I think it's super important is you just have to know that this is a team sport. And this may sound a little bit cheesy, but it's absolutely true. And why that's important based on your question is because sometimes you don't have the answer, and you're not the right person to give that answer, and your colleague is, right? And
Right.
your client is much better served if you step back and you say, let me bring so and so. Or if you're brainstorming with someone else, or if it's someone that is a junior person on your team. I do a lot of work with, how consumers are behaving and what they want, and then what are the implications for my clients. Now, I'm not a millennial, I'm not a Gen Z, I am not sitting in China. So depending on what the problem is, I need to go to people that are living and experience that day to day to be able to bring their perspective. So, and that's why it's, you have to know when you can take a step back, and I think it's okay, but it takes a while to get there, for sure.
Well, you mentioned that a lot of your job is researching and understanding the consumer. I'd love to bring it back a little bit to some of the early consulting jobs that you did take on. You spent a lot of time in like the beauty and luxury and personal care area. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
I did.
Tell us about that.
So in my prior life, which was not that far gone, which was about 18 months ago, I used to run the beauty, luxury, and personal care sector for my prior firm. And beauty was kind of my day-to-day, right? My major client was in beauty. And so I spent a lot of time there. Now, being in the consumer and retail industry, right? When you are an advisor and a strategist for those industries, and let's take beauty, for instance.
Yeah.
In that particular case, I'm also a consumer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I often take a step back and think through what are my habits, what are the behaviors that I'm changing, what are the needs that I have, and what are the implications for the brands and the communication and the way that my client is out there. So how are my own habits changing plays a lot into it. Now, again,
Okay.
I am not equaling, what I have and how I behave doesn't equal to how everybody else is, right? And so we do a lot of consumer research. We do a lot of focus groups, so we can actually get to the, to understand what drives people. Now, you can see certain behaviors playing out, but you don't necessarily know the root cause. So that becomes also part of our job. And then once you try to understand the root causes, you can somewhat help predict what's coming next. And you can help staying a little bit ahead of the game, unless it's something really that comes out of nowhere, like a pandemic.
Right. Well, that kind of takes me into another question that I had for you, Patricia, and that is, what are some of those things that you've noticed recently coming out of the pandemic that you think that, whether it's a beauty or luxury brand or just retailers or brands in general in the retail and CPG space, what should they be paying attention to that you think is missing? I know you mentioned like being in China. I mean, I think of like live streaming, for example, or selling, products to the Chinese consumer. We talked to Dave Ritter from A&M not too long ago, and that was one of the things that he was saying, that opportunity kind of got scaled back because of the pandemic, but it's still a very large opportunity. What kinds of things are you seeing in your research that are kind of leading you in one way or another, or that you think retailers should be paying attention to?
So I think the first thing that happened during the pandemic was, if you had a distribution that was not online, that was immediately gone, right? Stores were shut down. And so e-com became your main channel of distribution and sale. And so I think that caught a lot of people by surprise that were not necessarily digital natives, so more established legacy companies that had a roadmap for, how long it would take them to get to, the size that an e-com business represents of your total business, how it needs to be set up, what does a consumer journey looks like, what kind of tools, how do I talk to my consumer differently online than what I do if I'm in a physical space, especially for industries even like beauty, where touching and experimenting is so critical. And I think that, most companies have leapfrogged, 5-10 years down the road in a 12-month period, just so they can catch up, right? So I think that those that haven't done that yet will have to do it, because I do not believe that all of those behaviors are going to shift back post-pandemic, right? I mean, forming a certain habit takes a while to form, but we've already gone through kind of like 12 months. And then once those habits are in place, they're not that easy to shift back, right? So if I think about some of the things that I do today, some of that is not going to go away, right? It wasn't here, but the way I shop and how easy it is for me to now buy things online that I didn't think I would be buying before, or doing certain things at home, even from a beauty routine. Some of those things I don't see myself changing back even when the world opens up. So people need to get ready for it, for sure.
Right. Patricia, when you're dealing with something like a pandemic, you're a consultant, you are the expert. How are you approaching talking to your clients when they're in this kind of situation? I mean, nobody really knows the right answer, but what kind of skills did you have to pull from, or experiences did you have to pull from, to bring forward the best opportunities or paths for your clients? What did that take? Because it seems like it would be a difficult thing.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'm trying to reflect back, because I've been at this one client now for about a year and a month. So I started on this one place, and it's a retailer, 5 weeks before the pandemic, right? And we were there to help them on a set of issues or opportunities that 5 weeks in completely changed.
Right.
And so if I think about what were the things that we activated at once in terms of the role that we played as consultants, which I think were very helpful, were primarily, you know, number one, we almost kind of like, we started acting like we were just part of the team, right? And so their problem was our problem, right? So all of a sudden we were part of these daily, you know, multiple times a day meetings of saying, okay, this is what we need to do, right, to survive, right? And, you know, everything from what was safe for employees and, you know, the folks in the stores, distribution, but also in terms of, you know, conserving cash, to migrating things online, to looking at your assortment. We literally just we migrated from being, you know, fairly strategic, helping them with a 5 to 10 year plan, to all of a sudden helping them run the business and survive, right? And so I think, you know, they were very appreciative of that, but like just stirring that switch immediately was critical.
Was that something that, I mean, does that happen ever outside of a pandemic time? I mean, are you really like, as a consultant, jumping into that degree where like rolling up your sleeves and you're part of the team?
So yes, I feel like, you know, if I go back, because this particular, you know, experience has led me to go back and rethink some of my prior experiences, and also how I want to serve my clients going forward, right? And yes, some of the best work that we have done came from a very close collaboration and understanding of our client, which required at times being in day-to-day roles or being part of their day-to-day, but never like this, right? Never like it's happened before. And I actually think that there was something that's going to come out of it, which is we should be more like that than the, you know, the other way. Of course, there are certain kinds of problems or projects that are going to be very much like, you know, this is your sandbox, go off and, you know, and do that, and that's okay. But to really truly have a transformational role at a client, you have to be there on the day-to-day. The teams have to be mixed, right? There has to be shared accountabilities. And this sounds really great, and you know, it sounds like I could put that on a slide and it's gonna look good, and we've often done that, right? But have never lived it like I have been living it now. And yes, we would like to operate that way going forward too, for sure.
How has that changed you as a person, and not just a consultant, but like how you approach your work and how you stay inspired by the work?
I mean, the work, I mean, some of it is just pandemic, right? I feel like the work has, you know, one of the things that has changed this year is I take things a lot more lightly than I used to in the past, right? And so there's a degree of, you know, having a sense of humor that, you know, I've always had that, but I feel like it just took it to a whole other, you know, level. You know, I'm with my client all the time on Zoom, and they're in my living room pretty much the entire day, right? And so my not so perfect life, it's playing itself out in the background, right? And so it's the puppy, you know, it's my daughter, and you know, if she's hungry and she has a question, she's 10, she's not always going to wait or appreciate the fact that that's a pretty senior meeting. And so it's like, you know, it happens. There's something that you can control. So right before this meeting, for instance, I called my doorman and I said, do not ring the doorbell, do not ring the intercom, because the puppy is going to bark. And I wasn't sure if this was going to be live. And I was like, it cannot have the background noise. And then I called him again and I was like, Gus, if the building is on fire, you please call me.
Right. We all have to give each other a little bit more grace, I think, you know.
Yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
it's
But yes, I think grace is an absolute, you know, the right word, right? I think we have to be a lot more gracious, and it's both in the way that, you know, I interact with my clients, but also in the way that I interact with my team. It's just tough right now. And
Right.
there's no way to control what's happening in the background of our lives anymore. So we just have to be really gracious. Absolutely. I think that has
Well,
changed me also as a person.
Patricia, I'd love to kind of, as we start to close the conversation, hear about what you're doing now at Alvarez Marsal and what inspires you about the work that you're doing right now. What keeps you motivated through these pandemic times? Hopefully, towards the end of the pandemic
Oh
times.
my God, yeah. No, we're almost there. So yeah, it's I can see the light at the end of the tunnel right now. Um, I'm in a very unique place in my career right now because, even though I have been a consultant for 20 years, I was at one firm for the bulk of my career. I left after my daughter was born to try something different in the industry because I just felt I needed a little bit of a break from consulting to kind of like readjust. And then I realized, no, I really need to be a consultant. And I made a second choice again to go into consulting, this time a lot more like, okay, this is really what I'm good at. And I think I can have the flexibility I need to be a mom and have a career in consulting. And so I rejoined, and I was at, that second stint of my career in consulting, was about 5 years as a partner at Kearney. And then about a year and a half ago, I decided that I was going to join a group of friends, partners from other firms, and join them at A&M, which was standing up a consumer and retail group. And so this feels a little bit like being in a startup,
Okay.
but not letting go of being a consultant, which it essentially is what I know what to do, and it's what I'm good at. But we're building things now based on, how we've always kind of envisioned, and I'm doing that with friends, and I'm doing that in, under a brand and a home that I'm really enjoying being part of. So that's really inspiring for me right now. Just the idea that maybe, this thing that I'm building, I'm hoping it's a sure thing. This thing that I'm building will be here after I am retired at a beach in Brazil, where it's still gonna be alive, and it's gonna be here for the other people that I'm recruiting right now, so they can take it on as partners. So that's one. The other thing, which also really inspires me today, is there are certain topics and things that we're helping our clients tackle around things like inclusivity or sustainability that were not even remotely in the agenda when I started this job, right? And I think is it late? Yes, but it's a total step in the right direction. And just being part of that conversation and helping, build, a better environment for people that are working in these, in these places, or for consumers, is just, it's inspiring. So it's exciting.
Well, one thing that you just said that really hit me, and a piece of advice that I think I will be taking from this interview, is that it's okay to stop and start again. That it doesn't, if you feel like you need a break from something, or you want to be sure that
Totally.
you're on the right path, that it's okay to stop and go back and try it again. And if that's what you're passionate about, and that's what you're good at, that it will be there for you. And I think that's a really important thing for everybody listening to understand, regardless of what point in their career they are. What is the advice you'd give for somebody who listened to this, they loved your career story, they're interested in doing that themselves? What would you tell them?
All right. So, and this is advice that I give to all of my juniors, and I give it to people that are interviewing in general as you're starting out your career, right? And it's consulting, but I think it's applicable to anything that you do when you're just, starting your journey. So number one for me is always follow your moral compass and never, ever compromise on ethics. There's no second chances for that, right? And as a junior, you may encounter certain times in your life where people are asking you to do things that are outside of your comfort zone from an ethical standpoint. It doesn't matter who's asking you to do it. You never compromise on that, ever. I think the other thing is, I ask, all the young folks, I tell them, you're responsible for your own brand at the end of the day, right? So own it, right? Take responsibility for it. So everything that you do, everything that you say, how you communicate, how you engage with other people, that's all going to be part of your brand. And so don't think of your brand just as the place that you work with, that's sitting kind of on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile at the end of the day. It's, you are the biggest brand that you have and that you carry with yourself. And then I think the final thing is, you have to realize that no matter what situation you're in, there's always something that you're going to be learning from. And I think when you are starting a job, sometimes you're thinking, this is not too glamorous enough. It's not strategic enough. It doesn't matter. I mean, I've been in situations where I thought that early on in my career, and then 10 years down the road, something clicks and I'm like, oh, I'm using that I learned there. And It can be anything from, how to interact with people. It could be a particular topic. It could be a tough situation that you dealt with. Just throw yourself into anything that you do. It pays off.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. We always close with this question, and that is, Patricia, if you could look back on your career and write one person a thank you note for how they impacted your career in one way or another, who would you choose to write that note to, and what would you say to them?
Oh my goodness. Can I do two sets of people? No.
We try to stick to one, but if you can't possibly, okay.
One. No, because I always default to my parents because they are extraordinary.
They count as one unit. That's fine.
Okay,
you can count your parents as one.
No, but I'm going to go for someone else also. So I have this one partner that I work with, and he was the first partner I worked with when I moved from Brazil over to the US. And He now happens to be a partner at A&M in CRG. And yes, I feel like, I learned so much from him, right? And a lot of the things that I learned have to do with, at the end of the day, just doing what is right. And that has, it seems like pretty obvious, but it has so many implications for so many different things, from, how I build my teams and the pyramids and how I develop the people, to how I relate to my clients. And, everyone is unique and has a different way of delivering a message. But if you keep that to your core, you can sleep well at the end of the day. And I think that's really important.
Well, it sounds like it's hard to find people that will say that and put it into practice too, but it sounds like he was somebody who did that. So
yeah, he's still doing it.
Happy, yes, or still doing it. Yes. Happy that that you had that encounter, and that you are that person for a lot of people as well, on your team, and who knows who else in the future.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, Patricia, thank you so much for being a part of this and for sharing your story with us. It's Patricia Hong, partner at the Consumer and Retail Group at Alvarez Marsal. We appreciate you. Thanks, Patricia.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks for having me.
If you were going to have a concert, your own concert with 3 bands, dead or alive, who do you choose?
Oh my God. I feel like, my daughter would kill me if I don't pick like Taylor Swift, right?
Yeah.
She'll be like, you have the opportunity of a lifetime and you don't have like Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift. So I feel like they have to be in there.
Okay.
And then, maybe my third one, I would do this Brazilian singer, and he passed away in the 80s of AIDS, and his name is Cazuza, and he was wonderful and he was so great.